Thank all the witnesses for testifying, and the chair now recognizes himself for 5 minutes of questioning. This is up close and personal for me, this topic. I'm a real estate developer, and to have companies to come into an area and to be on the verge of breaking ground and then to be put into non-attainment status is tragic. And Ms. Rath, your chart showing 20%, 80% basically coming from outside with no control is real. So I direct my first question to Mr. Franquist. Can you explain the remedy a state can get from a successful 179B demonstration for international ozone?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I can. That's what's referred to as the 179B International Transport Demonstration. The relief really looks like this. What it does is what's commonly referred to as a but-for analysis, is that under the Clean Air Act, if you don't meet a standard within the given time, you're automatically bumped up to the next higher classification of non-attainment. Under the 179B, if you can make that demonstration successfully, that'll simply stop that bump up to the higher non-attainment area classification. The challenge there is you're still in that non-attainment classification until which time, in this case for us in Arizona, we're waiting for international emissions to drop. So the relief looks a lot like perpetual non-attainment, looks a lot like non-attainment NSR for potentially decades if we're waiting on international emissions to decrease.
Do you believe that this is a sufficient remedy compared to the amount of ozone that comes from the international sources that affects the attainment?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I do not, again, in my testimony, I want to make it very clear that we're not disputing some of the health challenges of ozone. But what often gets lost in this conversation is the health effects of poverty. And so when we look at areas like Yuma, Arizona, 19% unemployment, 19% of the residents there live below the poverty line. Healthy economies matter, and so when we're looking at public health holistically, we do need to look at how these remedies, or lack thereof, actually really truly do protect the residents of those non-attainment areas.
You're from Arizona. How did the strict ozone regulations drive business away from rural counties?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, it becomes a discouraging factor. It's a very simple analysis. If you are going to have to do emission offsets, they range in Arizona anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 per ton, or you can look to an area that is an attainment area. It's a very easy economic choice. You're going to go to the area that does not have the non-attainment area issues. So it discourages large businesses. I would say the other challenge with what we call the traditional offset piece is that normally if a business was looking to get those offsets, what they would do is either shut down a business and capture that headroom of those emissions, or put on a pollution control device on an old business and capture those emissions. What that does is simply shuts down a business. That may not be a net gain in jobs. So that business even may be able to come into that non-attainment area, but from a job perspective, it may be a net zero or even a loss of jobs depending on what facility they decide to shut down to get those offsets.
So why can't the businesses in rural counties offset ozone emissions like the businesses do in the cities?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, typically under the traditional offset programs, what you're looking to do is what I just explained, is either shut down a business or put pollution controls on an existing business. When you're in a rural area, those businesses, those large companies, or even small companies to get those offsets are scarce to non-existent. So when you look in the Yuma area, we simply just don't have the large, heavy industry there to even generate offsets. So we have to look to what's considered non-traditional offsets, things like captured fleets, electrification of truck stops, but it's extremely difficult to generate those non-traditional offsets and also get a rule through with the EPA, because it's very difficult to prove how you qualify and enforce some of those offsets. And so for the most part, states and local areas do not chase down the non-traditional offset programs.
Okay, Mr. Stella, what type of parameters go into the models that examine background ozone, and do you consider them reliable?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. There are a number of parameters related to both emissions inputs or meteorology or even the chemistry of ozone formation that go into our local scale models. and these are largely informed by the global community. The inventories that we have here in the United States are of a higher quality than those that go into the global model. And so when we try to mesh the two, we need to best understand exactly what we're putting into our simulations. Right now, it's the what goes in comes out sort of paradigm of the modeling, and until we can improve and understand what those conditions are, we're going to be at a loss at fully quantifying and qualifying how much international or boundary condition impact we have on our local scale monitors.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes